the moment you've all been waiting for. It's time for the Steak for Breakfast Podcast.
It's Tuesday, May 20th, 2025, and this is the Steak for Breakfast Podcast, episode 592 and 593. Make sure you're subscribed to the show. It's available across every downloadable podcasting platform. Find us on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Samsung, or Amazon Podcasts. Check out the Steak for Breakfast, the link tree to Think It Show's Instagram, our latest Substack, and verified accounts on X, Getter, and True Social.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the first of two big Tuesday editions of the show today. I'm Rowan. I'll be your host for the next few hours, and as always, there's lots of breaking news. A Joe Biden cancer diagnosis drops within hours of the special investigations audio being released to the public. We'll bring you the latest on this developing scandal. President Trump hosts the board of directors from the Kennedy Center in the West Wing last night as he looks to make fine arts and culture here in America great again. We'll bring you the latest on the status of President Trump's big, beautiful bill from Capitol Hill. And we'll get into the best of the rest of the biggest headlines to kick off your week on the right foot. We got a great slate of guests coming in here today as well. We'll be catching up with Tennessee Congresswoman Diana Harshberger for the first time with Texas Representative Michael Cloud. And we'll be circling back for the first time in a minute with Florida Congressman Greg Steube. But before we get into any of our interviews, let's dive right into the headlines and change the way you consume your news.
Smokey, this is not Nam. This is bowling. There are rules.
Today, Junior, America!
Steak.
For breakfast! So stand by.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Steak for Breakfast Podcast. I'm Ron. I'll be your host for the next couple hours. If you're a first-time listener, welcome to the show. If you're a long-time listener, welcome back to America's fastest-growing and quickly becoming favorite political podcast on a busy News Tuesday. Guys, make sure you're subscribed to the show. We're available across every downloadable podcasting platform. We prefer Apple and Spotify. You can also check us out on social media. We're on all of them as well. We are most active on X, and we've got two new YouTube channels. Search out Steak for Breakfast. We've got a channel that features full episodes and one called Steak Tidbits, where you hear some of the juiciest content from all of our podcasts, including highlights of our America First interviews. And hope everybody had a great weekend. I had a busy one. Believe it or not, over the course of 3 days, I slept a solid 5 hours, but got it done. Under budget and ahead of schedule, as we like here in America First. So for those wondering, and I did get your DMs, I love you all. We did win our Majors Little League Championship game this weekend. No high drama, maybe a little. Started out, it was a nice day, not too hot, kind of overcast. We got down 4-0 in the first inning. Best pitcher in the league on the bump for us. You could tell in his last regular season Little League appearance, as he'd make All-Stars. The next day, he was a little nervous, a little emotional. We talked him down, and he settled down. Wound up going 5 1/3 and gave up no more runs after that first inning. We cut the lead in half. By the end of the first, tie score after 2, 4-4. My son broke it open with an RBI double in the third inning to make it 5-4 us, and then we kind of just hung around until the fifth, where we added a couple more and wound up finishing off our opponent by a 9-4 score. So in a league where there's lots of parity and tons of participation trophies, we finished with, I believe, 21 wins overall. We went 4-1 in the playoffs, including the championship game. Double elimination is the way our playoffs are set up out here. And just an absolutely fantastic cap to a wonderful season. My son, who I still think, for all the haters and losers out there, is the best player in the league, finished with the lead league in home runs. He batted around 700. Probably led the league in walks and hit by pitches down the stretch as nobody wanted to throw to him anymore. But went 2 for 3 in all of our playoff games. Knocked in a bunch of RBIs and helped lead our team, which had a lot of good players on it. The best thing about it was, and this is what you have to do when you coach rec sports. I mean, travel ball, you're pretty much paying to be on good teams, and you don't expect there to be anything outside of the normal strengths and weaknesses that normal sports clubs bring to the table. But in rec ball, there's kids who have never played baseball before. They're picking up a bat for the first time when they're 11, 12 years old, and then they're going into a league where there's kids who have been playing since T-ball. so essentially 3 or 4 years old, and now play very competitive travel baseball in addition to, the hometown rec league. So it was a great job by us and all the dads who came and helped out with our squad. But yes, the Yankees are the Little League champions out here in Southern California. So it was great to finish the season in that sense. We didn't have any easy outs in our lineup. Even the kids that weren't proficient hitters, we told them to really understand what taking balls instead of just swinging at everything was. When you could see it and maybe catch up with it a little bit, foul it off. It's all about pitch count in Little League. If you have your back end of the lineup, which historically isn't really good in most Little League organizations, and you can get every batter having 6, 7, 8, 9 pitch at bats, that pitch count gets ran up pretty quick, and the more proficient starters and into the bullpen you go. So that was the news on the home front, and it was a good one. I mean, complete great team effort by our team. My son was so happy. He had about 5 of his really good friends on this team. I wanted it to be a good experience if I was going to manage for not just me, but my son. I picked a bunch of kids that he had played with over the years, either travel ball, Little League, or both. I got 3 other dads to come out and collaborate managing duties with me, so I didn't have to do too much except produce a lineup, work on the substitutes, and do the in-game switches. I had parents that were, they wanted to be the first base coach, they wanted to be the third base coach, they wanted to be the hype guy in the dugout. And it just worked out, just pleasurable experience. Everyone hated us in our league. 1, because we were good. 2, because we didn't go around celebrating, even though the kids were often excited. Even at the end of close games or big games, when the ump called it, they just got on the line, shook hands, and jogged to the outfield to hear our post-game recap. It was even like when the championship game was over, they wanted to celebrate, but they weren't really sure how. So there was some back bumping and hugging, a few tears. Some of the dads who I've been friends with for years in this Little League got a massive Target storage bin filled with ice water and gave me the Gatorade bath when the last out was secured. So, yeah, nice big fat championship rings for my son and his kiddo teammates. And it's on to All-Stars, which my son secured a spot. And we'll hopefully be helping out our district get out of the locality, which is where their all-star run ended last year in the final game, double elimination scenario of districts. So we'll see what happens there. But, it was busy, just, running around all weekend. The day after the Little League season ends, all-star season begins, and practice starts immediately. So my son went from the championship game, all those emotions, sleep over at one of my buddies' houses with all of his teammates that night, which was Saturday, and then Sunday afternoon they're out there on the field with a bunch of kids who, season ended maybe a few days or weeks prior because of getting knocked out of the playoffs. But getting ready for Little League All-Star season. And I love the way they turn it on. It's like Little League is parody, and then you get into All-Stars, and it literally turns into rec ball, travel ball. Most of the dads who coached it, I interviewed, they didn't pick me. Fuckers. Have extensive experience and are involved with travel sports either as, parents who really understand the game or parents who coach. And the tempo and the intensity just gets turned up. So this is like my favorite part of the year for my son because he gets in the best shape of his sports life ahead of football season, which will start in August. And All-Stars will run from pretty much crazily now until May, all the way up through the middle of July, where districts will end. And then my son's age group, which is 11, they can only play through the state of California. They can't go on to the Little League World Series. That is reserved for the 12-year-olds only. So that will be him next year. But back-to-back Little League All-Star appearances for my son. Happy for that. He earned it. You could make the argument, okay, maybe top 3 players in our whole league. Both other kids who I think some would consider better are a foot taller, 50 pounds heavier, and a year older than my son. He is as average a looking kid as possible, but he has just turned into one hell of a little baseball player. He loves it. We train endlessly on it. Travel ball, Little League, lessons at home. You name it, we're doing it. And he's got goals. He loves Aaron Judge, the Yankees all-star right fielder, but knows he'll never be as big as him. So, right now my son, even though he's 11 going on 12 and not even in middle school yet, really has goals and aspiration to play college baseball. It's not even MLB. So I like the fact that he understands that having good grades is something that goes along with that. He takes pride in doing all of his work and getting good test scores. So I guess we laid the right foundation for him. But yeah, it was just a busy weekend. We got a bunch of that. We started All-Stars, which rolled right into this week. End of my work schedule. My days off were kind of like, Little League Championship on the morning after my work week ended, and then All-Stars, and then All-Stars Monday. And then now they're going to do 4 or 5 All-Star practices a week, one day at a CrossFit facility, which is tonight. My son's moving travel ball teams, which is like a big thing. Anybody out there whose kids play travel anything, know when you switch teams, especially when you're going from one-to-one team locally without having to do much travel, it's like the gossip and the ends and beginnings of relationships and the betrayals. Here's the deal. My son went with a travel ball team as his first team after they begged him for a couple years to go. We were focusing on getting him into football 4 years ago. Pads, making the transition from a year or two of flag into pads. And it's a big transition. I coached football for a long time. And, we let him play football. He played fall ball for Little League and then the Little League season. And he would go get lessons at a travel ball facility, which they offer outside of joining the actual teams. And, they asked, oh, he's such a good hitter. Oh, he's getting better. Then he made All-Stars and they really wanted him. And, I agreed, and the first year it was fun. Did all the things that you would want in travel ball. You see your kid move up the lineup. You see your kid playing good positions. You see yourself going to different areas of California and places like Arizona and Nevada for major tournaments. You see your kid doing well if you put in the time, and they can catch up to the speed, which my son definitely did. So last year, at the end of the Little League season, I sat down and talked to my wife. I said, hey, this team we're on is a good foundation, but organizationally, I don't love all the things they do, especially because when we go to super major tournaments, they bring in some ringers from outside of the area. It's kind of like the ring chaser mentality, if you know what I'm talking about. All of you sports parents will. And they, load the lineup with kids who don't practice or pay or put in the work like we all do. And their justification is, we went to an open majors tournament and you got a nice perfect game ring, or you got a nice NCS ring, or you got a USSSA ring. Like, enjoy it. Enjoy the moment with your kids. Part of that is truthful. But then when it becomes something that, replaces the norm and becomes standard practice, it raises some red flags and concerns for me. Like, is this organization just trying to grow, and by growing, their post on social media of them winning everything is not an accurate description of what's really going on? I also, as someone who coached for now over 2 decades, noticed that the practice formats didn't really change over the course of the last 2 full years that we've been with this organization. Actually, they've minimized. We used to go to parks. There'd be like pitching machines for batting, pitching machines for outs in the outfield, a lot of fungo, this, that, and the other thing. And for the most part, they've narrowed it down to working in a facility where it's like turfed with a couple batting cages, a couple pitching alleys. It's the same coaches, but it just seemed like because they know they don't have to put in the work, because they can always call kids to come and jump on the team, they're not doing it in regards to development with my son or some of the other kids there who go all the time. We don't miss because we pay for it. And I like all the people and I like all the coaches, but, it was about a year ago where the drop-off in the investment that they were making in my kid became so much that I had to start learning how to coach baseball. And, I was buying my son all these training tools, the batting cage alley, the tees, the plates, the buckets of balls, the trainer mitts, and endlessly watching videos on how to help my son get better. So we go through this season, and it's more of the same. And we had a couple options, which have opened up over the last few months. Now, I know somebody who works at the high school where my kid will most likely be going unless he gets like an athletic scholarship to go to the private one over here, which isn't outside of the realms of impossibility because one of my son's best friend's mother will most likely be the head registrar by the time they get to high school. They love him. They know he's a stud. And I could see her saying like, hey, if the coaches want him, we'll give him an athletic scholarship. This is like a $40,000 a year Catholic school. That's like right around the corner from my house. But the public school, which is the one that I worked at for a very long time, is like literally at the end of our division of the neighborhood that we live in here in Southern California. And from elementary school travel up through the middle school coaches and all the way up to the high school, travel organization and high school coaches are all ran by this one organization. They have all of their coaches who are on the travel team, but they're also the middle school head coach. They're on the travel team, but one just got named, actually in the last couple of weeks, to be the high school manager. And they courted us last year. We went to a bunch of open workouts. But because my wife had made friends with this current travel organization we were with, right at the last minute and coinciding with when my sister died, they were like, hey, you guys have been working out with us during the whole All-Star Little League season. The season's coming to an end. We've got tournaments coming up. We'd like your son to be with us. What do you think? Within that couple day frames, my sister passed away. Schedule got messy. Long story short, I was so busy running back and forth between here and Arizona. I told them like, hey, you want to know what? There's a lot of stuff going on right now. I think we're going to be okay just staying where we're at for one more year. One of the coaches who's here is one of the coaches who I coached with a long time ago, who's still with this program and is now the hitting instructor for the high school team. So I kind of flirted back with them and then gave them some blue balls, if you want to look at it like that. So here we go. New season. It's end. We go and work out with one travel team. It seems like it's kind of put together in the way that the one we're at now. But one of the practices a week is like 40 minutes one way north and not till 7 o'clock at night on a Friday. Just didn't sit great with us. My son and two of his friends are trying to LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh big three themselves into a new travel organization, which one, makes it lucrative for the travel organization, and two, keeps my son and his buddies together. They've been on like consecutive Little League teams. 2 out of 3 of them were on a travel team together last year. Now they just won the championship again in Little League. All 3 of them got selected for All-Stars. I had 6 out of my 11 kids make All-Stars, 2 12s, 3 11s, 1 tournament of champions. So we did a really good job. But we decided to re-flirt with this local team, and I messaged my buddy. I hadn't talked to him since last year. I was looking at the text messages. Like, literally the last ones were like, bunch of stuff going on. My sister passed. We like what you guys are doing. We'll revisit. And he was like, oh, that's unfortunate, blah, blah, blah. So I go yesterday, and I bring my son after all-star practice to their open cages. He sees me, doesn't say hi. He tells my son to run, not walk to the cages. He proceeded to joke back and forth with him because my son's got a really good swing. Strong swing. For as underdeveloped as he is, he's just a really good baseball player. And, he comes out, and the other 2 dads who are friends with me and their kids are friends with mine, we're all there at the end. Long story short, he talked to me for about 15, 20 minutes afterwards and kind of just brushed them off as, well, maybe if my son will come, his others will just follow behind him. And, outside of shaking their hands and saying hi, didn't say anything to them. And they both left. I kind of felt bad. I actually had one of the 2 dads text me at like 6 o'clock this morning. He's like, hey, did you sign your life away to them last night or what? I kind of got the cold shoulder. But anyways, it's just, it's a big racket and it's a lot of pressure. But even my son started to get towards the end of the season. It's like, you go into these major tournaments with the team we're currently at, and my son, he could bat anywhere from like 2 to 5. Honestly, he's fast. He understands the game. He's got a huge spray chart, home run capabilities. And then, the team we're on, they'll bring like 4 or 5 ringers from out of area and add them to the lineup. And next thing you know, my son's batting like 10th or 11th. And like the 2 kids behind him are just absolutely horrible, and or like the kids who pay just to do travel ball to say they do travel ball. But it's like my son will hit a double, and then they'll both strike out to end the inning every single time. And positions on the field become a lot more scarce when you're bringing in like 5 or 6 ringers. So it's just a lot of different things. And like I always tell you guys, it's the same thing I tell my kids. If they sucked at sports, they wouldn't play. But my kids are great, and they need to play. So here's the deal. We're moving travel teams. We won the Little League Championship. Work's busy. My daughter's busy. She just started with her new year of soccer program. You know, she's on a top flight team for a soccer club that travels all over the Western region, Utah, Texas, all over California, Arizona, Nevada, places like that for one league game. Like they will do a weekend trip to play an hour and 10-minute game and pack it up and go home. It's ridiculously expensive, but very competitive as well. So that's why she's in it. She's getting ready to start her 7-week volleyball program. We'd like to get her in some beach-related volleyball as well this summer. They got a couple like crash courses, like 5-6 weeks, twice a week during summer break. So we'll see. And then I'm just going to fold it up and pack it in a little bit and take a couple days off this week. Yeah, we're taking off on Friday and we're getting out of town till Monday. We're going to go visit my mother out in the Phoenix area and spend a couple days with her. It's a tough time of the year. You know, back in 2011, my father died on my sister's birthday. Last year, my sister died on July 13th. And you got Mother's Day. You just got a bunch of stuff. And we always are so busy. And we might have to miss a day of all-star practice, which is kind of frowned upon, but I think it's for a good excuse to just decouple for a couple days. I've got a few days off work. We're going to pull my kids out of school for a couple days, go visit my mother a little bit, and then on the way back, stop off in Anaheim and check out the Yankees, who are in town to play the Angels next week on Tuesday. So, yeah, that's where we're going to be at, and that's what we're going to do. Long deserved, as it's been a very busy last couple of months here on Steak for Breakfast. In addition to doing the show and working a job that requires, 50, 55 hours of in-person work a week, having 2 kids who are very busy, a wife with a career who has a full work schedule as well, and then managing a Little League team between February and May. It's just been a busier than average time, and I'm looking to just reset that schedule into something a little bit more comfortable. Now, when we get back, it's still going to be batshit crazy. My son's going to have football workouts on Sunday, Little League workouts 5 days a week plus 1 day of CrossFit a week, and whatever else comes down the pike in addition to whatever my daughter's got going on as well. So we'll be busy, but not as busy as we were now. Not as busy as it is up on Capitol Hill today. So we got a bunch of stuff to talk about. We're going to jump in, and we will get to the big, beautiful bill and where it's at right now to kick off our second edition of Steak for Breakfast today. We're going to start off this episode talking about the Joe Biden scandal. We missed a lot of it last week. There's been some development, some commentary that we could provide commentary on and give you, corresponding audio to listen to. President Trump, he hosted the board of directors for the Kennedy Center, looking to make fine arts great again in America last night. And it wasn't really the event as much as it was what President Trump said when he did a Q&A. So we've got some highlights of that. Obviously, the latest on the status of President Trump's big, beautiful bill as it sits ahead of rules, which is set to convene at 1 o'clock in the morning tonight into tomorrow. Or, Wednesday into Thursday. And the best of the rest of the biggest headlines to kick off the week, including the announcement that's being made right now. I'm watching it up on the big screen in the studio. President Trump announces the creation and implementation of the Golden Dome missile shield for the United States. So pretty cool there. It was pretty cool to wake up this morning, too, and see that President Trump had decided to leave 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and head on over to Capitol Hill. Well, he'll be addressing some of our friends, which he did. Some of the guests who are here on the show sat in on President Trump, speaking to them this morning. So for the first time, we'll be catching up with Texas Representative Mike Cloud. It's going to be a great interview. We'll have a Congresswoman, Diana Harshbarger, at the end of this segment here. And our featured guest for our second edition of Steak for Breakfast today, making his illustrious return, Republican Capitol baseball game home run hitter Greg Stubbe will be here. So 3 members of Congress within 2 shows, lots of stuff to talk about. And before we jump into the Joe Biden thing, just to give you guys a little snippet of how President Trump felt, his visit to Capitol Hill to talk to the Republican conference went today. Let's check this out.
That's really what we did today. I think it was a really great, that was a meeting of love. Let me tell you, that was love in that room. There was no shouting. I think it was a meeting of love. There were a couple of things that we talked about specifically where some people felt a little bit one way or the other, not a big deal. And I covered them. It wasn't so much a speech. I covered certain points. And I think I'd be very surprised.
So that's how the president's feeling about that. Listen, I think it's going to be a lot of grandstanding and overtly these Congress people showing how they fought for their districts heading into the end of this thing's time up on Capitol Hill before we get to a floor vote at some time later this week, hopefully. They're aiming for Thursday and get this thing over the finish line, honestly. And as an elected official, what would you do? Not publicly state that you weren't going to fight for the things that you promised your constituents when you ran for election and essentially won it back in last November? No, you have to do it, even if it looks like you're not typically aligned up with the president or House leadership or a majority of the conference. And yes, I'm talking about like the SALT delegation and all the bullshit whiny baby stuff that they got going on there. Last budget, they had $10,000 worth of tax credit. Speaker Johnson tried to meet them. I don't think in the middle, but somewhere, gave them $30,000, and they're all walking around saying like, "Oh yeah, we are no votes unless we get $100,000." And it's just like, guys, come the fuck on. How much more of the American taxpayer has to be wasted on blue states where shit is just out of control because of the Newsoms and the Whitmers and the Pritzkers of the world? You know what I'm saying? America's not buying it. An overwhelming majority of Americans who vote conservative aren't all about it. And for much as it is nice, figuratively, to want to go out and help your constituents, the triple the amount you got last time should be more than enough, and I think will probably be the settling point by the time this bill gets through rules. So we'll have to see. But we'll be looking at that in the first segment of our second show today, the latest from the Hill. And I know that a lot of our guest lineup is going to determine that as well. So as of right now, I mentioned who's coming in this show. For our Friday edition, we might actually only do one podcast on Friday because I'm getting out of town and my kids are taking half days and it's a long drive. It's like 5-ish hours from here. You figure you stop once for gas. It's going to be in the evening. We're going to eat dinner. We're going to get into Arizona late, but we're going to spend like Saturday, Sunday, and Monday with my mother. But as of right now, Langworthy, Self, and Aaron Houchin are all confirmed. Trying to get one more, maybe Dr. Andy Harris. I was talking to his office this morning. She actually threw out some feelers for us who consequently will be on the show because of that on Friday. But it's just a busy time. And like I said, Rules is gaveling in at 1 a.m. tonight into tomorrow. So hopefully they can get this thing out by sometime in the late morning and then get it to a floor vote on Thursday, which is the goal. You're heading into a Memorial Day weekend. It's a 3-day because of the federal holiday, but typically your politicians are done with their work week at the end of the business day on Thursday. So they don't want any delays there. Jumping into what we're going to be covering now, though, and we need to talk about this. So late last week, and pretty much while we were all wrapped with our recording here on Steak for Breakfast, and following the output of audio tapes from the Robert Hur-led special investigation into Joe Biden's document case where, and I've got a clip of it, we'll meander around it, and you could just kind of sample how bad it really was. But the Democrats, the Biden family, the apparatus, which governed this country 4 years previously to Donald Trump reassuming office, announced that Joe Biden had prostate cancer, advanced prostate cancer. So advanced that it has metastatized to his bones and was now spread throughout his body, making it terminal. Some of the experts who have come out have said the obvious, and that there's no way that something like this, very slow-moving cancer, number one, went undetected, number two, went untreated, and number three, should have been held from the American public for the greater portion of the last 4 years. There are a lot of experts now who are saying it's almost a guarantee that Joe Biden went into office with a positive cancer diagnosis. And everyone knew and just kept it a secret. My whole thing is how tight that circle of trust around Joe Biden really was. Because, let me tell you something. Something like this, and we're not talking about all the other stuff that would leak out. Joe Biden's verbal meltdowns. Joe Biden shitting his pants at the Vatican or at the 9/11 celebration. Joe Biden falling down in front of the Air Force cadets, off of his bike, and up and down the steps heading into Air Force One. Some of the stuff was plain for us to see. Some of the stuff was leaked through Democrat insiders. There wasn't a peep of anything like this. And if there was, man, the investigations that are going to have to take place to talk about the cover-up that was Joe Biden's presidency is one thing. The second thing is, who are we going to hold accountable? And most importantly, and we say it all the time rhetorically, but who the fuck was running our country for the last 4 years as well? It's just very, very scary to understand the gravity of how big this monster of a narrative is. And for those who don't grasp how close we were to probably total global nuclear war because of the lack of leadership in Washington and coming out of the White House, you better just thank your lucky stars that Donald Trump is back in the Oval. If there was anyone that was ever going to reset this baseline and return it to a place of real American leadership throughout the world, it's here. It's with President Donald Trump. And moving forward, it's going to have to be Republicans for many, many years to come. I'm hoping for 8 straight out of the blocks after President Trump. If it's J.D. Vance, it's J.D. Vance. And then Republicans in the House, like this infighting. Like, I get it with the 2-year terms and how much time you have to spend in district and how accountable you have to be to your constituents, but we got to figure it out. We have to figure it out from getting to point A, which is what President Trump wants, and point B, how congressional Republicans deliver. That is the methodology that is going to keep us the speaker gavel in the midterms and add to the majority in the Senate up in the upper chamber. So let's jump into this right now. Here's some breaking news that came across the wire on Saturday. This is Mr. Potato Head Brian Stelter talking with one of the deadbeat hosts on CNN about the timing of Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis and how it coincided with the release of some of the audio from the Robert Hur investigation. Let's check this out.
Look, this is breaking news that came just about 2 hours ago, and it is now rippling through, television media, online. How are people consuming this? How is it reaching people?
And, I'm seeing some prostate cancer survivors, people who have lived with this disease, who have been through this, expressing support, both condolences, but also support and cheering Biden on as he faces this. The timing, Jessica, is just extraordinary. We know from the statement from his personal spokesman that Biden learned of the diagnosis on Friday. Well, what was the biggest Biden story on Friday? It was the release of those audio excerpts from his conversations with Robert Hur back in 2023. This was the audio audio that Axios obtained, almost certainly from the Trump administration, showing memory lapses. And you heard a lot of people on Friday talking about that audio being hard to hear, even excruciating to hear. Biden showing his age on those audio tapes that had never been heard by the public until now. So on the day that story was breaking, Biden was facing this personal news. At least that's according to the statement from his personal spokesman. So you have that as one element of the timing here. And then you have, as you and Paul just acknowledged, this book coming out, one of the biggest political books in several years. Take out our colleague Jake Tapper for a second. This book, no matter where it was coming from, was going to be a very big blockbuster book. And it just so happens two of the best reporters in Washington, Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, are the authors of it. It's already a bestseller based on the number of pre-orders. And so this book comes out in 2 days, but some of the excerpts have already come out, and it's reignited this debate in Washington and beyond within the Democratic Party about Biden, about whether he should have run for re-election at all. So it seems to me, Jessica, this debate doesn't end at all, but it is briefly put on pause.
Here's the thing. Just understand that there is no way that a sitting president of the United States has cancer that takes so long to become stage 4 that no one knew Joe Biden had it. Like, Joe Biden's team said that he learned about his diagnosis on Friday of last week, which is May 2025. No, 100% no. That is a lie. Don't ever believe that. 100% lie. There's no way. That's number one. And then these tell-all books that are coming out from the media, they're bestsellers on pre-orders because their publishers are buying it for them. They'll be dissected in the news, but nobody gives a shit about the fake news media writing tell-all books about stuff that they covered up for 4 years and then are now pretending not to. I heard, or I saw a clip online today circulating. I guess Jake Tapper, as a part of his book tour, stopped in on Megyn Kelly's podcast. Oh. You know how we feel about that skank here on Steak for Breakfast. And, she beat him into submission. Oh, yeah, we really need to go back and look as journalists what we need to do moving forward in our coverage of elected officials, blah, blah, blah. Go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself and all the money you're about to make. Megyn Kelly, shut up. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. We need to start focusing on what's ahead of us instead of just mulling in what's behind us. We want so much revenge and redemption and retribution for things that have happened to us instead of making sure that it never happens again. And there is a clearly defined line between the two. And you have to understand the worth of the latter more than the joy which may come in the aforementioned. And that's just kind of the way I look at it. You have to be able to prioritize these things and really understand what it would mean to not work on the things that worked against us since President Trump came down the golden escalator, and there are a lot of them. We really have to prioritize making sure that this stuff never happens again. And that's just the way the world works. So President Trump had a statement following this announcement, which came across the wires on Saturday, and in regards to Joe Biden having cancer. And I'm going to read it right now. It's brief. There was another one to follow, but because President Trump is concerned about one of the things. So here's what he had to say on Saturday afternoon. Melania and I are saddened to hear about Joe Biden's recent medical diagnosis. We will extend our warmest and best wishes to Jill and the family, and we wish Joe a fast and successful recovery. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. I had mentioned the Her tapes. I've got one audio file put aside. We could pause halfway through because, it is tedious to get through. But I definitely think it's something that if you haven't heard it yet, you need to either turn the volume up in your car or in your headphones or on your television set right now if you're streaming there, and just kind of take it in. Like, this is literally what was going on. How much of the majorest decisions for this country were made by Jill Biden and Hunter Biden and a bunch of 25-year-old transgender staffers over the course of 4 years, when this apparently is the sitting president of the United States at his peak, in his prime, and better than ever. Let's check it out.
Where did you keep papers that related to those things that you were actively working on?
Well, I don't know. This is what, 2017, 18, that area?
Yes, sir.
Remember, in this time frame, my son is either been deployed or is dying. And so it was, and by the way, there were still a lot of people at the time when I got out of the Senate that were encouraging me to run in this period, except the president. That's not a mean thing to say. I mean, he just thought that she had a better shot of winning the presidency than I did. And so I hadn't at this point, even though I'm at Penn, I hadn't walked away from the idea that I might run for office again. If I ran again, I'd be running for president. And so what was happening though, what month did Bo die? May 30th, 2018. Was it 2015 he had died?
2015.
I think it's 2015.
I'm not sure the months are, but I think that was
Yeah.
That's right, Mr. President.
And what's happened in the meantime is that Trump gets elected in November of 2017? 2016. All right. So.
And we'll pause it right there and jump in to the back half of that grueling audio. I mean, he's talking about 2017, 2018. Donald Trump is the president of the United States. He talked about him recently finishing his time in the Senate when, before Donald Trump took office, Joe Biden had just had consecutive terms with Barack Obama as the sitting vice president of the United States, 8 years. He talked about anytime he was challenged with anything, it being very difficult because Beau Biden, his dearly departed son, who lost the battle to cancer, whether it's 2017 or 2018, when in reality he died halfway through 2015. You're starting to see this all fall into place here, right? You're starting to see the pattern develop of just how bad this was. And this was what he's talking about still a full year before they decided to run him for election against Donald Trump in 2020. Remember, he was a late entry and then kind of stole the nomination from the Democrats who wanted to hitch their wagon to somebody else. And this is what we got. We literally had the Manchurian candidate and president for 4 years. Let's hear the back half of this audio a little bit before we move on.
Why not 2017 here?
That's when you left office, in January of 2017.
Okay. But that's when Trump gets sworn in, then,
Right.
January.
Right. Correct.
Okay, yeah. And in 2017, Beau had passed, and
They just told him it was 2015.
this is personal. The genesis of the book and the title, Promise Me Dad, was I know you're all close with your sons and daughters, but Beau was like my right arm, and that was my left. These guys were a year and a day apart, and they could finish each other's sentences. And Beau, I used to go home on the train in the period I was still in the Senate. Anyway, do you remember? There was not pressure. Bo knew how much I adored him. And maybe this sounds so. Everybody knew how close we were. There was not anybody in the world who wondered whether or not. Anyway. And so.
Sir, I'm wondering if this is a good time to take a break.
Yeah. Sounds like you need a little bit more than a break, Sleepy Joe. It was crazy to listen to. I probably heard about 10 clips that were similar to that, and each one's equally offending. Honestly, because of how played the American public was over this bullshit with hiding Joe Biden's sickness and mental acuity and now physical fitness. There's no way that this guy should have been in office. And probably how close we were to the brink. We might never know. But you should probably understand what the magnitude of these revelations are and how, figuratively, of course, heads need to roll because of it. President Trump did have another statement on Truth Social regarding Joe Biden this weekend. And it's a big one because it talks about this narrative. For as unfortunate as his cancer diagnosis is, the revelations that it's seeming to cover up now go into the fact that there are a lot of questions on who was running the country for the last 4 years. This is what he had to say. Whoever had control of the auto pen is looking to be a bigger and bigger scandal by the moment. It is a major part of a real crime that the presidential election of 2020 was rigged and stolen. Millions and millions of people knew that. But the radical left Democrats waged a campaign of inoculation and innocence like none that had ever been waged before. This is why the unselect committee of political thugs who were given a full and complete pardon by the person who wielded the now illegally used auto pen deleted and destroyed all evidence and information from their corrupt and vicious witch hunt against me, and many other people whose lives were completely shattered and destroyed by this historically criminal event. Remember, it all began with a dirty cop, James Comey, Obama, a hapless and cognitive impaired Sleepy Joe Biden, and now my very famous accusation that they spied on my campaign. Whoever had control of the auto pen is just the beginning. The biggest crime of all was that the 2020 presidential election was rigged, and I, MAGA, won the election by millions of votes, and everyone knows it. God bless America, for the fight has just begun. He ain't letting this go, folks. And anybody that thinks otherwise needs to get their heads examined. Yeah. It's wild. And as some of the biggest cover-uppers, like those in the mainstream press, they're coming to the harsh reality of just how complicit they are in these crimes. Here's Joe Doucheborough on his show, who was hosting a doctor talking about this diagnosis, how advanced and severe it is, and just his reaction should be enough to at least bring a smile to your face. Let's check it out.
You believe it is likely, if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone, that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years?
Oh, more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
So again, I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you were saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
And I'm just curious again, if your doctor to a president of the United States that is a male, that is an older man, would a prostate test, and again, we're just talking about a PSA screening, a blood test that you could do along with all the other blood tests. It's not even that it would be intrusive. Would this not be one of the first tests that you would conduct as a White House doctor?
If you're a White House doctor in this situation, I think you would certainly discuss it with the president and talk about the pros and cons. I think if you then ask, well, if President Biden says, well, if I'm your father, which patients often do, what would you recommend? I think the fact is that most White House doctors would recommend getting the test. And again, the evidence is, look at President Obama, President Bush, younger than President Biden, and they both got the test.
So yeah, there's that. And it's wild to have to kind of speculate, what the actual narrative will eventually be. My guess is if this cancer is as advanced and terminal as they're saying it is, having metastasized to the bones and therefore the blood and stuff in Joe Biden, then we'll probably get a lot more disclosure once the former president has passed, as you don't normally see, men in their mid-80s go into these extremely invasive treatments and walk away with a clean bill of health. Vice President J.D. Vance, while traveling on his way home from attending Pope Leo's first Mass in the Vatican City and in the Sixtine Chapel, had this to say about the announcement. Let's check it out.
Speaking of Joe Biden, sir, do you have any thoughts on his diagnosis?
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, of course, we wish the best for the former president's health. And, it sounds pretty serious, but hopefully he makes the right recovery. Like, I will say, whether the right time to have this conversation is now or at some point in the future, we really do need to be honest about whether the former president was capable of doing the job. And that's no, that you can separate the desire for him to have the right health outcome with the recognition that whether it was doctors or whether there were staffers around the former president, I don't think he was able to do a good job for the American people. And that's not politics. That's not because I disagreed with him on policy. That's because I don't think that he was in good enough health. In some ways, I blame him less than I blame the people around him. And why didn't the American people have a better sense of his health picture? Why didn't the American people have more accurate information about what he was actually dealing with? This is serious stuff. And this is the guy who carries around the nuclear football for the world's largest nuclear arsenal. This is not child's play, and we can pray for good health, but also recognize that if you're not in good enough health to do the job, you shouldn't be doing the job. Okay.
It's a fair statement, I think, to say the least. It's a lot more than you're getting out of Democrats right now. House Minority Leader, as always, in title only, Hakeem Jeffries, the New York congressman, had this to say about any questions regarding Joe Biden's current or former health status when he served as the President of the United States. Let's check this out.
Thank you, sir. Given the revelations with President Biden's cancer diagnosis and the release of the Her recording, why were Democrats not more open to talking about President Biden's age in 2024?
My thoughts and prayers have been extended to President Biden. It's a painful moment for him and his family. It's a very serious diagnosis. My expectation that President Biden is going to meet this moment with the courage and resilience that he's consistently shown. Seems to me entirely inappropriate that at this moment in time, when President Biden is dealing with a serious and aggressive form of cancer, there are Republicans who are peddling conspiracy theories and want us to look backward at a time when they actually are taking health care away from the American people. No, as House Democrats, we're going to look forward. They literally are trying to take health care away from millions of Americans at this very moment in the dead of night. And Republicans want to fan the flames of conspiracy theories at this moment? No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Two quick questions, just to follow up on President Biden. Have you had a chance to speak with him at all since his diagnosis, or do you intend to? And then secondly, just on Medicaid, I know for many months now you've been warning about the implications of cutting Medicaid. It seems there's some renewed discussions about FMAP and putting it back into the reconciliation bill. What are your chief concerns if that happens?
I have not had the opportunity to speak to President Biden subsequent to the news of the diagnosis becoming public yesterday. I do expect at some point in time I will speak directly to him to more directly communicate, my thoughts and prayers and that of the House Democratic Caucus.
You keep up those thoughts and prayers, Hakeem. I saw Don Jr. posted on social media last night, and it was obviously in a joking manner, but here's what he had to say. What I want to know is, how did Dr. Jill Biden miss stage 5 metastatic cancer, or is this yet another cover-up? Now, obviously, everybody knows that Jill Biden is a doctor of scholar, not a doctor of medicine, but at the same time, it goes into all of these things where, you had people losing their absolute minds over Elon Musk being chaired in to kick off cabinet level meetings when Jill Biden was essentially running them, along with Hunter for the past 4 years. So the hypocrisy is still at an all-time high. And although it's a very morbid and unfortunate, listen, here's the deal. Joe Biden is like one of the biggest scumbags on the face of the earth. We obviously don't wish cancer and death on anybody, but for, the targeting of political opponents, and how much he knew what was going on or not. You talk about the border, the Afghan withdrawal, the crime, the sham, fraud, witch hunts, and hoax investigations into President Trump and his family and his friends and his supporters, what they did to everybody in regards to January 6th, etc. In addition to all of the laundry list of things Joe Biden had did, enriching his family by monetizing the office of the Vice President of the United States, and when he was a U.S. Senator from Delaware, all the way through all the rest of the scumbaggery and racism and divisive behavior that he's shown over the entirety of his 50-plus years of public service. But that's neither here nor there. The only thing we can kind of rely on now are the facts and how fast they come out. President Trump weighed in on this yesterday during a dinner for the board of directors of the Kennedy Center, as we are trying to make American fine arts great again. And this is what he had to say about Sleepy Joe and his cancer diagnosis. Let's check it out.
Do you want to respond to President Biden being diagnosed with cancer? Are you going to call your predecessor?
I think it's very sad, actually. I'm surprised that it wasn't, the public wasn't notified a long time ago, because to get to stage 9, that's a long time. I just had my physical. You saw that. You saw the results of that particular test. I think that test is standard to pretty much anybody getting a physical, good physical. We had the doctors at the White House and over at Walter Reed, which is a fantastic hospital, do it. I did a very complete physical, including cognitive tests. I'm proud to announce I aced it. Got them all. I got them all right. You proud of me? Yes. Your husband would be proud of me for getting them all right. It's a little risk. If I didn't get them all right, these people would be after me. It would be not a good situation. But I think, frankly, anybody running for president should take a cognitive test. They say.
So again, the art of the weave. He doesn't want to talk about on whether or not he had a private conversation with Joe Biden or anybody in his family. He doesn't really want to weigh in on the diagnosis either, as anything he says will more than likely be taken out of context. Like, President Trump doesn't care that Joe Biden has cancer, or President Trump hopes that Joe Biden dies. The media is believe me, we know it's not below them. And, why not just weave it around and talk about yourself? There was some other things that came out from some of the speaking events, not regarding this, but President Trump in general this weekend that I think were pretty big. The first one was, President Trump had an over 2-hour-long phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin regarding the ongoing push to end the war in Ukraine. He put out a very lengthy statement on his Truth Social account. I'm going to read it right now. I just completed my 2-hour call with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. I believe it went very well. Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations towards a ceasefire and, more importantly, an end to the war. The conditions for what will be negotiated by the two parties as it can only be know the details of a negotiation that nobody else would be aware of. The tone and the spirit of the conversations were excellent. If it wasn't, I would say so now rather than later. Russia wants to do a large-scale trade deal with the United States when this catastrophic bloodbath is over, and I agree. There is a tremendous opportunity for Russia to create massive amounts of jobs and wealth. Its potential is unlimited. Likewise, Ukraine could be a great beneficiary on trade in the process of rebuilding its country. Negotiations between Russia and Ukraine will begin immediately. I have so far informed President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Union Commission, and President Emmanuel Macron of France, Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, and President Alexander Stubb of Finland during a call with me, immediately after the call with President Putin. The Vatican, represented by the Pope, has stated that it would be very interested in hosting these peace negotiations. Let the process begin. So there's a lot of moving parts in there. First of all, the fact that Pope Leo is offering the Vatican to host what would be historic ceasefire negotiations is pretty awesome, in my opinion, that you have a pope now who is so dialed into geopolitics and how a smoother and calmer world leads to more probably extension of practice of religion. In addition, bringing Russia back into the global trade fold is a game changer. We all know Putin wants what everyone else is getting, how he was kicked out of the G7 and the G20 and the WTO and all those things over the years for his aggressive behaviors towards his neighbors. It's like another example of what's going on with China and Syria and Iran, that President Trump is willing to put the past in the past for a better and more prosperous future for everyone on the planet. Speaks a lot about leadership. It also lends credit to the argument we just made over the course of the past 30, 40 minutes talking about what the real deal was with Joe Biden and how it's a night and day difference now that President Trump is back. We're going to leave it at that as we're getting ready to jump in with our first guest, Tennessee Congresswoman Diana Harshberger. But before we get into it with her, how about a first check-in with one of our partners?
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Battleborn Coffee Roasters. They're law enforcement, family-owned, and they produce some of the best available specialty-grade coffee. That means all those beans have gone through an extensive process to remove all defects. Battleborn researches all their sources, farms, and milling stations to make sure you're not getting any pesticides or chemical fertilizers. Sit back and have a cup of their borderline Mexico Chiapas blend while you're out sitting on an X or sitting in the office. High-quality coffee from high-quality people. Use promo code STEAK for 20% off your first order. Make sure you go check them out at battleborn.coffee.
All right, joining us first on the show today, this big Tuesday edition of the Steak for Breakfast podcast. She's the Congresswoman who represents Tennessee's 1st Congressional District, which means we're welcoming back Representative Diana Harshberger. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, always a pleasure. Glad to be here.
Well, we had some breaking news this morning, and you're here to share it with us. You just got out of the big, beautiful conference huddle with President Trump, who was up on Capitol Hill today to talk about the progress of the big, beautiful bill. Why don't you give us some of the, steak and potatoes of the meeting and the importance of it this close to the finish line to have the President of the United States up on the Hill to talk to Congress about it?
Well, he was there talking with us, and, honestly, he just wanted to make sure that we all get on the same page with what we need to do as far as, the cuts and meeting that 1.5 trillion floor that was what we promised we would do. And, he really, there's a couple of sticking points. Medicaid is one of the things he said we're not going to touch. And the other is salt. And those were the two things. The most important thing, I guess you could say, though, was that we need to get the debt ceiling increase. And he wants to change it from debt ceiling to debt extension. He doesn't like the word debt ceiling, so maybe we'll end up calling it a debt extension in the future. But those were probably the top three things that we talked about. And, everybody needs to be on the same page. And really, we didn't have time for a lot of questions. I knew he would talk quite a bit about the things that he prioritized, but those are the three things. Where we're at with what we've done out of our committee on Medicaid, getting fraud, waste, and abuse out of the system.
Sure.
He doesn't really want to deal with SALT right now, and that is really blue state governors. That's their deal, and he doesn't want the rest of the country to be penalized for that. And then making sure we can extend the debt ceiling. He'd love to have it through his presidency, but you got to reconfigure some numbers if that was the case. I think right now they have it at $5 trillion, which will get us through the midterms.
I see some of your esteemed colleagues still coming out and trying to hold the line on things like SALT, like you had mentioned. This is a tough issue, although Speaker Johnson did give room for quite an increase compared to what it was last time. I believe the difference was, between 10 and 20,000. But here's the deal. Do you think because some of your counterparts up there on Congress who are Republicans in blue states who are fighting for this, President Trump calls it grandstanding, but do you just think this is them kind of holding the line into the vote so it looks like in the eyes of their voters, maybe they're doing the most that they can, which, essentially is their job. They all sent up to Capitol Hill to fight for their constituents. But at the end of the day, when it comes to the votes, that we're not going to see as many people not with the program here as we are going to see vote for this and pass it?
Well, yeah, of course they're doing what their constituents want them to do, but look, it only applies to a certain percent of even their constituents.
Right.
And, I'll tell you what, myself and Morgan Griffith, we butt up to Southwest Virginia and East Tennessee. And he made a great point last night when we were talking about this. We have constituents, and the average income for our constituents are around $50,000. And you're talking about people wanting the SALT tax to be taken up, the benefit to be taken up to $30,000, and even Representative Lawler wants it at $100,000. I'm like, do you not think that's a slap in the face to the rest of the country that don't make near what they're wanting us to put in this bill? No. And I think that's where the president said, he says, I agree with you, the people in the SALT states, but he said, now is not the time to mess with this, because that's going to be an issue, and it's going to be a deadly issue come midterms. And we want them to keep their seats, but don't penalize the states that are run well, because it's something nobody even knew about until they start talking about it. And that's where we're at. He didn't want to deal with that right now.
And then you mentioned the $1.5 trillion in savings. That's, of course, over 10 years. Do you think that is a good starting line that Republicans have kind of honed in on with this bill? There could be another reconciliation package, a smaller one, obviously, at some point later. There's also going to be the fiscal year 2026 budget that you guys are going to be working on as well. There's going to be an opportunity to make continued cuts and eliminate more of the fraud, waste, and abuse. But, when you saw the ridiculous number that came out of the Senate, Congresswoman, a couple weeks ago, and how you guys were like galaxies apart, I do think, in my opinion, that House Republicans have done a good job to show they are willing to work towards real cuts for the American people, and that's one of the things they ran on, one of the things that helped President Trump get back to office. And in that kind of topic item, I think you guys are on a pretty good page with that.
Oh, yeah. Listen, the bottom line is the president's approval ratings are moving up, and that $1.5 trillion is a floor. It is not a ceiling. It is a floor. We've already found more money in what we proposed in reconciliation than what we were tasked to find. And there's a lot more. There is a lot more that we could cut. And, hopefully, look, I hope we get everything done and we get it across the finish line right now, because we don't want the tax cuts to expire. We'd love to make them all permanent and put in what President Trump has asked us to put in. We have to find a way to pay for it. And I think we've pretty much, plus it has to get to the Senate and pass the Byrd rule. And, the parliamentarian over there, for God's sakes, there's a lot of things we have to look at on this side. There's still some things that we're negotiating that could make this bill even better, because it's going to be historic to do what we're trying to do right now. But later on, hopefully they'll have another reconciliation bill and we can do even more to save the American taxpayer money.
No, that makes sense right there. And then sticking in the thread, we did see President Trump today reassure Americans that he didn't want Medicaid touched too much outside of fraud, waste, and abuse. How eye-opening has it been, though, to get in there and see the amount of fraud, waste, and abuse, the amount of people who are either able-bodied, the amount of possible illegal aliens who are on the system, and how that is just tying down the overall debt crisis and spending crisis that Congress has to deal with on a pretty much annual basis, having to deal with the fact that, the Democrats use it as fear tactics, saying that only the people people that need to be on it are the people that are going to lose it, when it's the people that don't need to be on it or shouldn't that you guys are trying to remove and make that component of how Congress and essentially the government spends money great again?
Oh, it is eye-opening just to know how Medicaid has expanded under Obamacare. This people don't understand. I live in a state that did not expand. They knew it was too good to be true, and they didn't do it. There's about 10 states that didn't. What our fear is, if we don't do this Medicaid restructure properly, is that there will be an incentive to make the states that did not expand under Obamacare go ahead and do the expansion because they'll be losing too much money. You've got illegals being covered at 100%. You've got the very people that Medicaid was intended, the elderly, the disabled, the pregnant women and children. That's who the Medicaid was instituted for.
Yep.
They will get less of a reimbursement than your able-bodied people that report zero income and they're sitting at home. They don't qualify for Obamacare because they're reporting zero income. There's a way to get those people, and I think I can't even remember what the number is. There's 1.4 million, I think. There's even more than that, 1.6 maybe million that are illegal that are getting benefits at 100%.
Yep.
Why in God's name do we keep incentivizing these states that have expanded to cover people that are able-bodied? Just the work requirement that we put in the bill, they didn't want it to start till 2029. And to me, that's crazy. Back it up. Let's get the states on board to where we can make that effective starting in 2026, going into 2027, and we can benefit and see those savings. States will have to gear up to do that. But even a 19-hour work requirement is really, you can honestly, you can volunteer, you can take care of an elderly person or
Sure.
a child. There's so many exemptions for this. It's unbelievable. But that was estimated to save over $300 billion just instituting that. And we're trying to mirror that with the SNAP benefits work requirements that people balked at before. But you're always going to have those people who don't want to get rid of the Green New Deal. And I'm talking about on our side.
Yep.
They still want those subsidies. And we're trying to phase those out. My God above, you're not just fighting the left, you're still fighting people in your party who want a handout. And I'm like, do not give them time to let this phase out because it will never go away. Ronald Reagan said it best, the closest thing to eternal life is a federal program. It never dies.
That's the truth right there.
It's the truth. It's the truth.
No, it certainly is. And then, I hate to look ahead, but members of Congress, including yourself, have been focused on some other things outside of the big, beautiful bill. That's going to be the codification of some of President Trump's, many of them, according to Speaker Johnson's executive orders. Listen, this is an important component right here. As you guys have all seen, we've all seen it in real time kind of shake out. The Democrats don't have to win elections. They don't have to have the speaker gavel. They don't have to have the majority in the Senate. They don't even have to have the chief executive of essentially the planet in the president of the United States to be able to use lawfare to stop a president's executive orders with the stroke of a pen using the radical activist judges, as we've seen over the course of the past couple months. Codifying executive orders into law would eliminate that process and force the Democrats to either figure it out or move back to the middle. Either one's going to take a lot of time. Codifying executive orders might not take as much, and just kind of want to get your commentary how important it is to stay focused on things like that, even outside of the reconciliation package.
Well, it's totally, look, we're going to be codifying a lot of those executive orders in the reconciliation, and I need to get a current list of those as we speak. But I have my staff going through every executive order, I don't even know, 150 or whatever, find out what already has legislation tied to it, which ones do not, which ones I could help with legislation to help codify those executive orders. I'm not waiting on somebody to do it. I'm trying to be proactive and get this stuff done. What we can't get in reconciliation, we need to go ahead and put a legislative bill up because, look, this is, I can't stress enough how this is once in a lifetime, effort to where we can all work to get things done that nobody's ever going to tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And so we will never have this trifecta at this level again with this president where we can get what we have to get done for the American people who have said time and time again, we gave you a mandate. Don't sit on your duffs and sit up there and just wait till your next election comes and goes. You better do what we told you to do or we're going to kick you out. And that's the sentiment of the American public right now. And if you look at the polling, and I just saw some recent polling that said We want fraud, waste, and abuse out of our Medicaid system. We don't want to pay for salt tax. There's a whole list of things that people in swing districts, they want the people. You want to get reelected in the swing district, do what's got to be done on Medicaid, do what's got to be done on salt. Don't mess with it. Leave it as it is. And I'd get rid of all of it myself and let them pay the penalty. But that's just me. I come from a rural district where it's no nonsense, and I'm trying to bring common sense back into the equation when I look at these things. And I'm not defiant in any way, but I know there's more money we can find and we can cut, and you just have to have able-bodied people who want to do that.
Everything we talked about was circling back to common sense, and there you were. You brought it home for us today. In closing today, Congresswoman, I do have to ask, just want a little bit of commentary on like a story that's continuing to develop, and that's the cover-up with Joe Biden. I mean, it was easy to make fun of things like his mental acuity and the way he was able to or not deliver at speaking events throughout the course of his presidency. But after the reveal of the health diagnosis, which disclosed that he has advanced stages of terminal cancer. In addition to that, this comes out at a time right when the Her tapes were being released over the weekend as well. They kind of like met in the middle of it. We know how combating narratives works. But outside of that, it's really alarming to the American people. We used to opine and hypothesize here on the show who really is running the country. This health diagnosis and the fact that Joe Biden was very sick, which may have led to things like his mental ability to handle being the president of the United States, it's going to look like down the road there are going to be some big-time investigations into how big of a cover-up this was. And at some point, just with the minor details we're getting now, there's going to be a massive disclosure for the American people.
Oh, totally. I feel sorry for the man. He said something, when was it? Back when he was first elected, that he had cancer. They tried to hush him up.
Yep.
And, if you look, and I saw something yesterday that said it had already metastasized to the bone. That doesn't just happen overnight. That is a slow, progressive cancer. And most men that are diagnosed with prostate cancer at a later age, look, old age will get them before the prostate cancer does. But in this case, that's had to be growing for quite a while.
Sure.
And his mental acuity, the things that he was doing, we don't know if he got treated for that. We don't know what he was doing. And you're right. Who in God's name was running this country, making those decisions to let 20 million illegals into our country, to the demise of legal citizens paying for that? I mean, it boggles your mind, and it is the biggest cover-up in history, and somebody needs to be held accountable. All these tell-all books that they're writing right now, oh, well, we didn't, we just found this out. Bullcrap, I call it. And they knew it. We knew it. We could see it. And, I hate it. That's the worst case of elder abuse I've ever seen on the public stage. And why his wife, why his family would allow that to happen, it's a travesty. And, hey, bring charges against Jill. She knew it. My God above, if your husband can't even finish a sentence, I'd be a little bit worried.
Sure. No, you're right. And it's like we always make the joke that the Democrats will do anything to retain power. This might be like the gold standard, or what will be the perfect example of what we mean by that. At the expense of literally Joe Biden's life, did the Democrats not want to unwield power and, let everybody know just how sick he was? Listen, Congresswoman, busy day. But we did it. We made it. We caught up with you. We got some great stuff for our listenership. We really do appreciate it. We've got everything live linked in our show description today, including a link to your congressional website. They can sign up for the newsletter, see all the great stuff you're doing up on the Hill, and more. Where can we find you on social media? We'll live link that as well.
It's at Rep Harshbarger.
It certainly is, and she certainly was here today, bringing the fire and fury on Steak for Breakfast. This is the Congresswoman who represents Tennessee 1. She's obviously out there fighting for all of America first. Representative Diana Harshbarger, thanks for joining us on the show. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you again soon.
Okay, thanks so much.
The Kennedy Center mission is to be the crown jewel of the arts and culture in our nation's capital, and under our new leadership, we're going to take this revered institution to heights that it's never seen before. I think we can take this to really because we have the right place. We have all the politicians, and then we have the people that want to get to know the politicians for lots of bad reasons. And, we have everybody here. They have to be here for something, sometime. I've got total confidence in the just great team that Rick and the group have put together. Sergio's done fantastically.
All right, jump back into the news portion of the show here. Second news segment on the first of two big Tuesday editions of the Steak for Breakfast podcast. I'm Roan, and it was great catching up with Tennessee Congresswoman Diana Harshberger again on a busy day up on Capitol Hill. That was President Trump last night in the West Wing hosting the board of the Kennedy Center, looking to make the fine arts and culture in America great again. You know, one of the biggest things that led to the overall demise of the Kennedy Center was the amount of political propaganda, DEI, and hateful rhetoric that was coming out of it. You know, whether it be things like Hamilton or anything in between, transgender plays and all this other woke Hollywood bullshit. It wasn't taking something that was supposed to be a bastion of the preservation of Americans' arts and culture and just turning it into weaponized political statements against conservatives and, of course, the America First movement. President Trump alluded to that in the opening of his speech. I've pulled the clip. Let's check it out.
Previous leadership wasted millions and millions of dollars and handed us a budget deficit of $26 million. Can you believe that? In addition, the programming was out of control with rampant political propaganda, DEI, and inappropriate shows. We had some very inappropriate shows, to put it very nicely. They had dance parties for, quote, queer and trans youth. Oh. And I guess that's all right for certain people. Quote, and I'm just quoting, I'm not saying it, queer and trans youth. That wasn't working out too well. They had a Marxist anti-police performance, and they had lesbian-only Shakespeare, which is different. Who thinks of these ideas, really? It's different. It's different. Oh, we're bringing our country back so fast.
The DEI, the woke, the political propaganda, all that stuff is over. They know it. They're coping and seething over it still. They're hanging on in the last grasps in small factions across the country to the best of their abilities, but we are winning. This is a 97 to 99 to 3 to 1% issue. All this DEI woke political bullshit. Nobody cares about lesbian Shakespeare. Nobody cares about dance parties for transgender and queer children. And the days of the safe spaces are over here in America. We're not going to tolerate it anymore. We're not going to subject our children to it in the schools, to our adults to it in the workplace. We are going to make this country great again. And we are going to get back to celebrating our rich and illustrious culture and traditions like never before. You know, we have to be able to do that. And I just don't think that anyone outside of the very extreme far political left wants it any other way. Even a lot of the people who are Democrats, even those who might consider themselves progressive, they've always been, well, it's okay to do it everywhere, just not at my job, just not to my kids. But it's okay for everyone to be gay or trans or whatever, illegal aliens, etc., anti-cop. They love the cops when they save the day for them. They hate the cops when they save the day for anybody else. And that's just where the radical hypocrisy of the Democrat Party stems from these days. And we have to be able to crush it in every context and rebuild all of the rich and wholesome traditions that this country was built on. And there are a lot of them, many, which have been, forgotten by our newest of generations who know absolutely nothing about the amazing rise to greatness that this country had over the past, 150 years or so. And President Trump understands that, and it's going to be one of his, I really do think, defining moments of the Trump doctrine that he reinstills in this country again. He alluded to just that in his opening remarks last night, talking about less divisive content and more fine arts, music, and culture, which brings our country together. Let's check it out.
Instead of putting forward programming that tears our country down and tears our country apart, the Kennedy Center should be the nation's premier venue for lifting up the best of our country and lifting up the American arts, theater, music, and culture. And together, it's really an honor to be here. I have so many friends on the board. This is a hot board, just like we have a hot country. We have a hot country. Our country was stone cold 8 months ago. It all began on November 5th. Does everybody know that that was Election Day? And from that moment on, and then January 20th came, and what we've done, we have almost no inflation. Our energy prices are way down. Our gasoline costs are way down. Groceries are way down.
Groceries are down. Gas prices are at their lowest in 4 years for a Memorial Day weekend as well. America is hot, as we just saw on the back end of a major economic trip for President Trump to the Middle East. And, yeah, we have brought this country back from the brink and are now understanding just how close we were to it with the recent revelations of Joe Biden's declining health that we may have been over the course of the past 4 years. It doesn't say enough for that great board of directors. You know, it's President Trump is obviously the chairman of the board, but you got Rick Grinnell there in the most senior of positions as the director of the Kennedy Center. People like Susie Wiles and Dan Scavino and others who sit on the board. This is exactly what you want in regards to replacing the content that President Trump has just mentioned over the course of the past couple clips, and moving forward, implementing that good, wholesome culture which has made this country great. You know, the fine arts especially here in America are something that has wholesomely defined our country throughout the generations, and we have just gotten away from it, whether it be having stuff to do with the inception of our country and the founding fathers and the framers, up through all the difficulties we had gone through over the years, and demonizing those who have brought us back from the brink so many times, like Abraham Lincoln, etc. Even the celebratory nature of the 2 world wars, which, you know, America helped wield Europe to winning, aren't celebrated in the same ways that historically they might have been in previous generations here in the States. And we just have to stop with the erasure of what made this country amazing. You know, it's like, if the only thing that America wants to celebrate is the progressive nature of and the weaponization of the First Amendment and free speech, to where you could just be like a fat, multiracial, double-gendered, blue-haired meanie with poor hygiene and the inability to talk to they, them, or she, hims, then we're doomed. You know, the people who weaponize our laws and our rights here in the United States, I mean, they should be cast off into obscurity, because that's just exactly what they're doing. They're weaponizing it for bad when they were intended for nothing but good. And I really do think we rest on our laurels so often in this country with all the freedoms people have of speech and religion and all the other things that they don't in other countries, that we become subject to the benefit of how good it is here, and how sometimes it's a trap where we should be able to come back to the center and have a conversation like, hey, you know, baking the cake for the gays, that was like one thing. You know, letting them marry and be in the military, that's another. But teaching hypersexualization in kindergarten classes and then having those children be able to chop off their genitals, it's taking it a little bit far. Oh, this is all the benefits of living in America. No, it's really not. It really isn't. And, man, if you could show any of the founding fathers snippets of where we are right now as a society, they'd probably have a combination of stroke and heart attack at the same time and die instantly. And it was just never intended to be this way. And President Trump understands this, talking here about the fine arts, but in trade, when he's abroad, in safety, when describing the border, domestically, in reference to the economy, and so on and so forth. It's part of what he wants to do to make sure this country is in a better position than when he, either became a really public figure or decided to run for public office. You pick. Guys, wherever you're listening to the show today, hope you're enjoying the first of 2 big Tuesday editions of the Steak for Breakfast podcast. Do us a favor, share the show with your friends, family, coworkers, and loved ones, and then head over to your favorite podcasting platform, whether it's Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Samsung, Amazon Podcast, or wherever you're hearing the show. Subscribe for free. Make sure we're downloading to your electronic device. Rate the show 5 stars, and please write a review. And then check us out on social media, Twitter, Getter, True Social, Instagram, and TikTok is where we have accounts. Find them, follow them, hit the notification bell. In addition, check out our 2 new YouTube channels, and you'll never miss out on all the great stuff we're doing down here at Steak for Breakfast. So President Trump had some commentary on some of the other things. You know, he was just getting into the economy there. He would be talking about some of the other things related to it while hosting this dinner. And I've got a couple of the clips pulled up for you guys. Well, the first one having to do with the tariffs and the business deals that we're getting ready to announce with many of our long-standing geopolitical trade allies. Let's hear it.
5 years, they were taking advantage of us. We never did anything, but now we're doing it to them and fairly, I'll tell you what, modestly. But we'll be taking, and we are taking in right now, 25% in cars, 25% on steel and aluminum, 25% on other things, and that'll be going up to 50, 75, maybe 100 in some cases. We have to get our pharmaceutical industry back. Once we establish that in another couple of weeks, it'll start roaring back. It's already roaring back because they know we're doing it. And it's really been, you've done a great job. But
I'm talking about the pharmaceuticals with possible Asian trade impact there. And then obviously with things like aluminum and steel and timber, continuing to put places like Canada on notice as well, as the tariffs there are ridiculously not in favor of the United States. President Trump also talked about the importance of what's going on up on Capitol Hill today, and that is the big, beautiful bill clearing all 11 committees and now being set to undergo rules, which is set to gavel in at 1 a.m. tonight. He talked about the importance of getting the big, beautiful bill passed, and we're going to hear it right now. Check it out.
To get the one great, big, beautiful bill, it'll be the greatest tax cuts in history. If we don't get it, that means the Democrats will have stopped us, and that means people will get a 68% tax increase, the largest in history. And if we do get it, we're going to have the largest tax decrease in history. And all my life, I've watched politicians screaming, "We will cut your taxes." This is the only group where they say, "We're going to raise your taxes," and they think they're going to win. There's something wrong with them. I don't know what the hell is going on. "We're going to raise your taxes." And people say, "That's strange. I've never heard it before."
You know, that is the truth. President Trump talked about the massive tax increases that will come if the big, beautiful bill is not passed and gotten to his desk by the time the Trump tax cuts expire at sometime in later July. Now, the Democrats are working night and day to continue to whip Republicans to propose opposition to Speaker Johnson, Republican House leadership, Leader Thune up in the Senate, and President Trump by demanding more things which cost more money, which is the opposite of what everyone essentially ran on in last year's election cycle. But the Democrats aim to defeat this bill from passing on the House floor in an open vote as early as this Thursday. If that becomes the case, Americans will see nearly a 70% increase in their taxes. Democrats will call defeating that bill and the implementation of that tax increase a victory for them, which baffles the mind and is kind of a joking point to President Trump. Last clip I've got before we jump in with Texas Congressman Michael McLeod for the first time is this. President Trump, you know, we're definitely going to get a little bit of President Trump joking-wise, the comedic aspect, and every time he has like a less than formal, maybe even sometimes during most of the formal speaking events he gives. You know, going back towards revisiting the 2020 election and how he felt before that November announcement in like 2021 or 2022 where he decided he was going to do it again. Really set the tone for the table that we have set before us today. And when he opens up the door and gives us a little bit of insight into where he was, let's just say, mentally or emotionally getting ready to get back into that race, well, I think it just makes for great content. Let's check it out.
got the Olympics, and then we got through Johnny, who's the boss. He's a friend of mine. We got the World Cup. I got them both, and I said, man, I won't be president. I got the Olympics and the World Cup, and I won't be president. And they're going to forget that I got them. Nobody's going to mention it because, a little bit, that's the way life is. And then they rigged the election. And then I said, you know what I'll do? I'll run again, and I'll shove it up their ass. And that's what I did. And all of a sudden, I then realized, I said, you know what? I got the Olympics, I got the World Cup, and I got the 250th. Look at the way this works out. So if they would have left us alone and wouldn't have cheated on the election and wouldn't have rigged it, I would have been retired right now. I would have been happily doing something else. And instead, they have me for 4 more years. Can you believe it? So it has.
That's the truth. In addition to those 3, the 250th birthday of the United States, the World Cup, the Olympics. He's also got the World Baseball Classic next year and in 2026 as well. So it's going to be just ridiculously busy for major events that are going to put this country under the spotlight, to see the progress that President Trump and his administration has made to make America great again, and how much more work we need to do in the remaining years that he's left in office. But yeah, it was a kind of a celebratory tone, aired with a little bit of caution in regards to the big, beautiful bill, urging his fellow Republicans to get stuff done, so much so that he showed up on the Hill today. And, in a joking sense, wanted to talk about some of the accomplishments that he had made previously when he was in office, and how now it's time to put kind of the cherry on top and celebrate a good day's or first term's work next year, while the continuing push to save America is obviously at the forefront. So we're going to leave it at that right now as we're getting ready to jump in with Texas Congressman Mike Cloud for the first time. But before we do, here's another check-in with one of our partners.
It's an unpleasant truth that 42% of Americans are obese and 79% of Americans are overweight. That's practically 1 in every 2 Americans living day to day with every minute counting down to the end of an unhealthy existence. It's time to change that and make Americans healthy again. You've probably heard about weight loss injections that can help you get back into that right mindset and help curb those cravings so you can focus on what's really important. New Hope Wellness has changed thousands of lives, and maybe it can change yours too. They are American family-owned and operated with the goal of saving lives. With convenient telehealth options, you can speak to a licensed professional from the comfort of your own home, and all products are delivered discreetly to your front door. Visit newhopewellness.com/state and start your journey to a better you. That's newhopewellness.com/state to get your free consultation and $100 off your first order. 1-800-527-2150. Make America healthy again.
All right, joining us next on the show today, this big Tuesday edition of the Steak for Breakfast podcast. He's the congressman who represents Texas's 27th congressional district, and we are welcoming in for the first time Congressman Michael Cloud. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Yeah, great being with you.
Great to host. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about. It's not like it's not a busy start to the week, and if you want to lead in, Congressman, let's get the latest on the reconciliation package. We know you guys were called back up to the Hill on the back end of the weekend, and we've had some developments headed into the week. Maybe you can give us the latest.
Yeah, we had some works, over the weekend. We've been negotiating on it. It wasn't where it needed to be when we left town on Friday. The Budget Committee stayed in town, and many of us have been connecting with them and the administration all throughout the weekend to get this where it needs to go. So some progress has been made, enough to get it out of the Budget Committee late last night. There's some work that still needs to be done as we move forward. So, there's an understanding we need to get this done for the American people. We want to see Trump's agenda go forward, but at the same time, we don't want to be doing things like codifying Obamacare. And we've got to, when we look at what's going on in our economy, especially you look at the bond markets and what's happening there, we've got to show that we have what it takes as a Congress to shift course when it comes to our fiscal trajectory. That's going to shore up the Treasury bond markets. That'll help shore up the dollar and make sure that we're able to benefit from the great work that President Trump is doing on the executive side.
That's a good point. And, when you talk about the fiscal importance and long-term impact that this bill could potentially have, and how, you have to admit House Republicans are kind of in the midst of like a generational change here. If you just look at maybe a couple sessions ago, it was a lot different Congress than it is now. And, there are some people who are maybe reluctant to want to see the actual long-term spending cuts. There are some people who are worried about how it will be viewed in their district and by their constituents. But, you know, the methodology that you guys have used since late 2024 to get things over the finish line, including the elections and the start of this session of Congress, is sticking together. And I think optically, if it's that behind the agenda of President Trump and obviously the mandate the voters gave last fall to you guys when the House was retained by Republicans, it seems like that's going to be what it takes. But what is the importance of this bill to get some of these big financial cuts done and have them be meaningful and show heading into the midterm election cycle that you guys are serious about reducing the deficit and the budget spending and all that other stuff?
Well, right now, the tax cuts expire this year, which means every family would see a massive increase in taxes if we can't get that passed. And so the question, though, becomes how do we pay for it? How do we do what we need to do without continuing to kick the can down the road?
Right.
This also gives us a great opportunity. No one who's taken a serious look at our federal government thinks that we're using our money most efficiently, most effectively as it could be. So it gives us a good opportunity to work on that side of the ledger and find savings for the American people and begin the work of getting our government working more efficiently, providing a better return on investment to the taxpayer. So it's an important process that we're going through. But again, we've got to make sure that we're thinking long term. And of course, so many people up here are concerned about the next election, and understandably so. But the priority beyond that has got to be, if we're coming here to serve, we're standing on the shoulders of generations who've paid the price for us to have the freedoms and the liberties that we share. And so making sure that we pass those on to our kids and our grandkids has got to be the overriding priority as we tackle all these issues.
And there are a lot of them. I see some disagreements between House members that have made it into the press today. But I think at the end of the day, and much like coming out of budgetary, you guys are going to be able to, for the most part, stick together and get this thing through and delivered for the American people. Listen, Congressman, I want to segue a little bit and talk about President Trump just had a huge trip to the Middle East last week. Some of them are calling it historic. There was a lot of business and entrepreneurship secured for the United States. We're going to be creating jobs. We're going to be strengthening deals, both in trade and defense with a lot of our partners in the region. The optics of it looked like, I guess you could say that a lot of leadership in the Middle East breathed a sigh of relief to see American leadership was back on the global stage. But, I just wanted to get some commentary how you saw this big trip shake out for President Trump and his administration.
Well, it was amazing to watch the reception and, of course, the results. We have $10 trillion of investment that they're looking to invest in the United States. That's going to mean jobs. It's going to mean great economy. That's going to mean, American influence is continuing to lead the way. But what a difference a president makes. To see Biden on the world stage, there was nothing of this sort of respect and reception, and to see President Trump going to the Middle East, and who would have thought that the YMCA song would become the international welcome song of the presidency? Even seeing their folks playing live, some played the tracks, but some actually, they had a band welcoming and playing it. It was just remarkable to see. But you could see the respect that they have for this president. They know that he works hard for the American people, and he's working to get deals. There's going to be a win-win in it, but he's going to make sure they get the win in for the American people. For far too long, all these deals have left the American people behind. And finally, we have a president who's going to be fair with other countries, and they can respect that. But he's going to make sure to get the win for the American people.
No, you make a great point. And it was like every leader that President Trump visited in the region had to try and one-up each other on how outside of the box of normal diplomacy. I mean, MBS doesn't go out to the tarmac to meet any world leader. And he was there for President Trump, like with his hand over his heart. And, President Trump was calling him Mohammed to the press by the time he left the kingdom, which was just, to me, like mind-blowing on how strong and public that relationship is now that, the president feels comfortable using that. I mean, they gave President Trump in UAE like the title of, something that a U.S. president hasn't gotten in over 2 decades. And it's just, again, American leadership is back. I think the good way we were able to secure a lot of these trade deals, it kind of blows through the narrative that, people are scared of President Trump or, they're just biding their time and waiting for it. It's like they can't wait to invest in this administration and, more importantly, our country enough again. And it was probably the unshared feeling that they did endure under Joe Biden and during the last presidency as well. Congressman, what about some of the recent Supreme Court rulings that we've seen? We've seen some that are favorable in regards to immigration policy trying to be promoted by the Trump administration, but on the other hand, there's a couple that just make you scratch their head. And it's like, are we ruling with our hearts here, or are we ruling in favor of the Constitution? It seems like with every new ruling that comes out, it kind of lends to confusion.
Yeah, exactly. You almost wonder sometimes if the intellectualism is getting the way of common sense over there. Most of us would look at the clear letter of the law and understand that the executive has the ability and the authority given to him by the American electorate to lead and to execute on the laws of the land. And the fact that district judges can give nationwide injunctions, the job description's in the title. It's a district judge. The idea that they can have authority, that kind of broad-based authority over the execution of the office of the presidency, I think goes well beyond the Constitution. We've been questioning the judiciary on it. I was extremely disappointed to see the Chief Justice come out and, in a sense, scold the president on this when there's so much malfeasance we've seen in the judiciary, where he would be best to kind of get the plank out of his own eye before he gets the speck out of somebody else's in this regard. There's so much work that needs to be done to clean up our judiciary, and he should stay focused on that.
Do you think outside of the reconciliation package, I mean, obviously you guys are going to be working on codification next, as well as the fiscal year 26 budget, but getting some kind of legislation to the president's desk that could possibly limit or restrict, like you said, district judges from doing nationwide injunctions, it just doesn't seem like it lines up constitutionally. And again, this comes on the heel of 4 years when anywhere between 10 and 20 million people were let unabatedly, unscreened, unvetted, unchecked into this country and dumped from coast to coast. There was no Supreme Court injunctions that stopped the Biden administration, no matter how hard politicians or members of Congress or anybody who tried to stop it, they just fell on deaf ears. Now, when a president comes in with an obvious mandate and a number one issue like immigration is trying to clean it up, it's everyone from the Democrat side of Congress, and then, like you had mentioned, the district or lower level judges, all the way up to the Supreme Court, that are stopping the president from cleaning up the mess that's been distributed all over the country for the past 4+ years. So how do you guys feel about, moving forward? How fast and urgent of an issue is it to codify a lot of President Trump's executive orders into law? Because this would circumvent that process in almost its totality.
Yeah, my big concern as we've approached this term has been, I have every confidence that the president's going to do great work. My concern is that if Congress doesn't come up behind it and codify these things, it'll just be a reprieve on bad practices of the federal government instead of a course correction. And so we have to come behind the president's executive orders, and we have to codify them into law. And then when it comes to the judiciary, there's a number of things Congress can do. You'll hear the judiciary complain about the threat of impeachment. Well, I was in a committee hearing last week, and they said, well, it's not right for them to have to, make their judgments under the threat of impeachment. And that was kind of like me saying, well, it's not right. I have to, vote, keeping in mind what the voters might think. This is the constitutional way that they are kept in check. And so they should be thinking about that with every ruling they make. And, with all of these courts, all these federal courts, with the exception of the Supreme Court, were created by Congress. Right. And Congress can restructure the judiciary. We can defund some of these courts, and we can bring impeachment. And one of the things looking at now is defining what good behavior might mean, because people think they're a lifetime appointment, but that's not what the Constitution says. It's not what the law says. It says good behavior. And so, people who are making these decisions based on not on constitutional principles, but on their political leanings or personal beliefs or whatever, because they want to be president for a day. That's not good behavior when it comes to the judiciary. And so we need to be addressing that we've got to get this reconciliation package done.
Agreed.
But that is certainly a high priority that needs to be addressed this term.
No, and in addition to codifying executive orders, how important is it to really continue to examine the fraud, waste, and abuse that has been identified by DOGE? Some committees up on Congress who are taking it a little bit more seriously than others and making sure moving forward. I mean, I hear people say that, let's claw back pre-COVID and all these other things. Like, it's great to have a big, beautiful picture on it, but we really have to start making some impactful cuts because, when you look at anything past the futures and the way that a lot of the economists have said this budget deficit and national debt is just going to continue to be inflated over the course of the next several decades, it's unsustainable as a country to operate in the red in its entirety. We can certainly operate in the black again. I think we're off to a good start of, talking about how we get there, but at the same time, it's going to take Congress to come along and help that as well.
Sure. Yeah. And really the right place for most of that work to happen is in the appropriations process, where we can take the lessons from DOGE. We can take those specific spending cuts. The president came out with his budget just a couple of weeks ago, and basically it would boost up the military spending because we understand the threats from China. So it gives a bit of a boost there, so we can begin to build our capabilities toward future technologies and the threats that are facing us down the line, but then presents to us a 30% reduction on the discretionary side, they say, of government. So we'll be looking through to find savings, taking a lot of the lessons that DOGE has uncovered. A lot of that's waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement.
Yep.
But then there's a side of DOGE too, where you're looking at pure corruption. The tens of billions of dollars that went out the door in the last 30, 45 days of the Biden administration with no oversight and with contracts that were, nothing in the realm of what norms were and didn't have the accountability measures that your basic contracts have always had. Those kind of things. There's a criminal aspect to that too that we'll have to be looking at and referring to DOJ for prosecution.
Well, that's why I don't want to call it like a sympathy narrative, but the narrative, I think, broke over the weekend about former President Biden's current health situation. It's so interesting how that, which, obviously they're admitting now is something he's dealt with for quite a long time, comes out right when some of those her tapes.
Yes, exactly. Right after the her tapes finally come out. Yeah.
Really interesting the way, this was the administration that had no accountability whatsoever. So it's in the past. And much like we talked about today, Congressman, we're looking forward. It was great catching up with you for the first time, having you as a guest on the show. We'd love to have you back at some point in the future. We've got everything live linked in our show description today, including a link to your congressional website where our listeners can sign up for your newsletter, check out all the great work you're doing on Capitol Hill. Where can we find you on social media? We'll live link that as well.
Yeah, on X now, Facebook, it's RepCloudTX, I believe. And you can look for us there and get all the updates of what's going on. And again, if you sign up for our mailing list, we send out one email a week to let everybody know what we're doing, committees, ledge work, all that kind of stuff. And love to hear from you.
Well, we loved hearing from you today here on the show. There's the Congressman representing Texas 27 up there fighting for all of America First on Capitol Hill. Representative Michael Cloud, thanks for joining us on the show, sir. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks so much.
Guys, we're coming back with another all-new edition of the Steak for Breakfast podcast, so sit back, relax, and let us change the way you consume your news.